Hi, I'm Larkin Swain. Welcome to Sanctuary, an ongoing conversation for seekers like me who want to dive deep into the meaning and power of the temple. These are expansive, transparent, and sometimes challenging conversations with thoughtful and wise people about the history, the symbols, the rituals, and the experiences that make up temple worship. I have a lot of questions. Maybe you do too. Welcome to the journey. Hey guys, this is Larkin with Sanctuary. I've got a great episode to share with you today, a conversation that I had with George Handley. I really can't express how much I loved this conversation with George. It felt like a celebration of life and an invitation to live and love it more entirely. This conversation was an exploration of the 5 covenants that we make in the temple, with an emphasis on the first and last, obedience and consecration. George shares on his personal journey of coming to know the true God and developing his own personal desire to offer his obedience to him. We explore what true freedom is, the gift of our weaknesses, and answering the call to a life of generosity and service. And that perhaps what becomes unveiled as we truly align ourselves with these laws is our ability to see just how precious and beautiful life really is. George Handley has taught at BYU in the fields of humanities and environmental studies for the past 28 years. He and his wife Amy are the parents of 4 children and grandparents of 4 little ones. He's an incredible writer, and he's written a handful of books. I will include a few of them in the show notes if you want to check them out. And without further ado, here is George. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, George, welcome to Sanctuary. It's so good to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so excited about this. I have to say, I was reading your writing and I have loved your writing so much. And I'm excited to hear that you have some books because I've really just love you as a writer. I always am sharing things with my dad because we share the same love for good writing. And he was like, send me that right now. That was so good. So you have some fans.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
That's just so you know.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is going to be a conversation exploring covenants, the 5 covenants that we make in the temple. We're specifically going to emphasize obedience and consecration because you have written about both. But I'd love to just touch on all of them. But before we get started on that, could you just introduce yourself? Who are you? What are you up to? How did you kind of get to this point of writing about covenants?
Okay.
Yeah, if you will.
Well, I teach at BYU. I've been there 28 years, and I teach in humanities and comparative literature. And I guess there's a lot I could say by way of background, but one thing that's maybe relevant to our conversation today is that I didn't grow up with a lot of training or orientation toward the temple. It was just not a thing in my family growing up. And so when I decided to go on a mission, I actually didn't know that I was needing to get endowed before I left, and I didn't know what an endowment was. I didn't take a temple prep class.
Perfect.
I had 0 preparation for it. And so it was a rough and tumble kind of steep learning curve.
Yeah.
When I got started. But a really crucial fact about my relationship to the temple is that my oldest brother had taken his life when he was 22 years old and I was 18. And I, at some point, figured out that I could go through the temple for him because he had never gone through the temple. So shortly before I left on my mission, after I had been endowed, I went through the temple for him. And that was probably, the most important decision I ever made at that point in my life, because I had a confirmation that he had received it. I had a dream where we conversed, and he was telling me all these wonderful things he was learning and the ways he was progressing. And I've never looked back with any regret about, making that step in my life, because I learned something fundamental about the restored gospel that I really appreciate. And that is that the temple represents the kind of grand opening for the entire human family to rectify a lot of injustices and accidents accidents of birth, accidents of chemistry and biology, and accidents of physics that cause terrible things to happen to people that make for a very unjust set of circumstances or unequal set of circumstances for people. And the temple is, for me, the vehicle by which those things are brought back into balance. So I've often said ever since, I just don't know if I could even be a Christian if it weren't for the temple, because wow. I think the fact that we're always doing this work for the dead is centrally important to remind us that God is just and that progress is eternal and opportunity is always available. I think that's a really beautiful principle of the temple. So that orients me a lot to why I go and why I believe, because of the sort of eternal and ongoing impact of the atonement on our lives well beyond death, which I don't know that we always fully appreciate in the church. That's a pretty remarkable thing.
Wow. That is amazing for me to hear, because I know so many Christians who like can get behind everything but the temple.
Yeah.
And so that's fascinating to hear you to say that. And that's really moving to me. I think there's something really special and unique offered to us here, and a truth that's revealed here that I don't ever want to take for granted. So thank you for sharing that. Feels really tender.
Sure.
I love that we are going to be exploring obedience and consecration, because they are these sort of bookend covenants. And I think that there's an interesting connection between the two that I'm curious about. But to kind of set the stage, you made an interesting comment about the creation story is the context in which we make covenants. At the beginning of the endowment, well, we have the initiatory, which is the preparatory ordinances, but at the beginning of the endowment ceremony, the creation story is told in great detail before we move into these covenants. And you made a comment about the importance of that. Could you speak to that before we get going?
Yeah, I draw a lot of strength from King Benjamin's address in Mosiah, and he is reminding his audience of the fact of God as the creator. And he calls them unworthy creatures when he's speaking to them, which, when I was a younger reader of that speech, I was either felt offended by it or agreed with it. Like, yeah, I'm an unworthy creature.
Right.
But what he means by that is that we are created beings, right? And that we do not earn the right to exist. Our existence is a gift itself. And I think for me, the central role of the creation story in the endowment ceremony is a reminder of that as the primary fact that is important to keep in front of me. Because if I remember my own createdness, if I remember my dependence on a creator and my connection to the rest of the creation, and you and I experience that, or can anyway, on a daily basis, just by coming into contact with the physical world and appreciating the beauty of the world, or experiencing the fragility of the world, what it means to be embodied. It's a kind of existential joy, existential gratitude that it inspires in us. And that's a really, really good place to start one's spiritual journey, because it's not transactional anymore. Too much was already given and always is being given. So there's no, as King Benjamin says, there's no payback. You're not going to earn your way back. You're not going to, put more savings into the account and be more worthy. You just need to remember how good and gracious and generous God is. So I think the creation story is there to remind us of that. I think it's also there to remind us to take good care of the creation, which, I've written about quite a bit in other contexts, but I just went through the temple this morning to, get ready for our conversation. And I was just reminded that, God is commanding all of creation to have joy. He's commanding all of creation to multiply and replenish, not just us. And I think that's also a good way to kind of tame our ego a little bit, because sometimes when we're in battles with ourselves, trying to overcome our weaknesses or trying to find purposes and our purpose in life, trying to find peace. I think it's so healthy to get outside of yourself a little bit and break down your ego and the stories you're telling yourself. And nature just does that in such a remarkable way. Really appreciating other living things, appreciating the complexity and beauty and diversity of the world around us and the cause of wonder. It humbles us. It helps us to feel dependent and grateful and vulnerable, but precisely because we feel vulnerable, we also are more appreciative of the fact that we are fortunate to be alive, right? To have the gift of existence. That makes me less acquisitive. I don't need as many things. I don't need to control other people. I don't need to get too anxious about my own life. If I just remind myself on a daily basis that I'm lucky to be alive. And I think that's what the creation story reminds us, and that we're supposed to glory in it. You know, it's pretty amazing.
You are just speaking to my soul as a lover of the earth. Thank you for bringing that forward, because all of that I feel in my bones.
It's because it's true.
It's true. There's such an honesty in nature that strips everything away, and you can only come as you are, and it quiets out the noise of what's not real and what's not important, and brings us down to earth into base reality. So that's really powerful. And I love what you mentioned about, we didn't earn the right to be created, to even be here. And I think that paradigm shift from earning the right, I think we do that so much. We think that way in regards to obedience, that we have to earn our way to heaven, to God. But shifting into this framework of freely given, that we are, life itself has been freely given to us as a gift from God. And in that space, I feel an abundance, and I feel that we are taken care of. And so I feel that I can relax into that relationship more. Which is kind of what we're going to get into as we explore obedience. You shared a story, and you wrote a paper on obedience, and you shared a story about this experience that you had with your father that you described as the beginning of your conversion, and also helping you to understand obedience in a new way. Would you share that with us?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, except it involves telling stories of my sins, which I won't go into detail. But I was a wayward kid. Yeah, I was a wayward kid, and not a rebel. I wasn't a rebel. I just was. I was weak, and I was also really, really curious, and I didn't have a lot of convictions. And I lived in a community in Connecticut, outside of New York City. There were lots of alcohol and drugs available in my high school and my junior high school. So pretty early on, I kind of fell into drinking a little bit and smoking marijuana and just kind of exploring. And I didn't do it openly because I was actually really embarrassed. There was a part of me anyway that was like, oh, I can't own it. I didn't have the courage to be a real rebel. I was like hiding it, and I was, the people I least wanted to know about it were my parents, because I really loved and admired them, and they were good people, and they were simple people. They weren't doctrinaire people, not overly active, but not inactive, but just good people, good souls who loved me, And so I just kind of instinctively knew. I was 14 years old when this got started, and I was like, I can't tell them because they'll be so disappointed in me. And I felt shame, right? Like a lot of kids do, and a lot of adults do. This went on for 3 years, and I dodged and weaved when I got occasionally confronted about it in gentle ways by my mother. Usually she would just say, what are you doing with your friends? And I would act like, what are you talking about? I don't know what, it was just the stupid teenage stories that aren't worth repeating. All of this has been thoroughly discussed with my parents as adults, and we've laughed about it, but it got to a point where my dad just came into my room on a Saturday morning, and it was just around the beginning of my senior year in high school. And I'd been out the night before with friends, and he just kind of closed the door behind him and pulled a chair up next to the bed and started rubbing my back. And, this was not a typical thing for him to do on a Saturday morning. And then he spoke very gently to me, and I was pretending, I guess, to be foggy and still sleepy, but I knew something was up. And he said, your mother and I have been very worried about you. And one of the things that really worries us is that it looks to us like maybe you don't feel comfortable telling us what's going on in your life, and that maybe there's something we've done to create an environment here where you don't feel like you can be yourself. So it's really important to me that you can feel that way in this home. And you're old enough now that I think we just need to have that kind of openness. And I wish I could recreate the dialogue exactly, but he said to me, I need to know what you're doing, but I want you to know that I'm not asking because I'm mad at you or I'm going to punish you. I'm asking because I don't want a son of mine to feel that he has to hide from me. And I don't know if it was because he had me physically boxed in against the wall in my bed and was being so kind about it. But frankly, I was wanting to tell him, deep down, I really didn't like carrying this burden. I didn't like weaving and dodging and all that. So he started asking me specific questions, and I started giving him very specific answers. And then he said something which I still think is the most brave thing for a father to say to a son. But he said, I'm not going to punish you about any of this. As I said, my only request is that you will tell me where you're going and who you're going to be with and what you're going to do. That's the only thing. Can I get that commitment from you? And I said, yeah, I can do that. And of course I felt pretty good being able to open up like that. And this was a Saturday morning. I had a Saturday evening plan with my friends, and I must have mulled it over all day long. And by the time evening rolled around, I walked into his bedroom and I said, I'm going to this friend's house and there's going to be alcohol there, and I'm not going to partake in any of that. And he looked at me and he said, really? Is that what you want? I said, yeah, in fact, I'm done. And I'm going to tell my friends that. And I did.
Wow.
So I sort of felt like the lesson I took from that, and first of all, let me just say, I don't know that that's the right thing for every parent to do in any sort of situation. I've told that story to other parents who've had kids they're worried about, and I was prepared to have that conversation with my kids if they needed it. They never did. And my dad would never claim to be a perfect father. But in that moment, he was absolutely perfect. I mean, what he said was exactly what I needed. And it started me on a path of spirituality that I was suddenly really, really happy to start. And what was most enjoyable about it is that it finally was a free choice. It felt to me like a lot of adolescents, I guess. I didn't like being told what to do. So if you leaned on me too hard, I would just, again, I wouldn't come out in open rebellion. I'd probably be more sneaky about it and say what you wanted to hear and then go do what I wanted to do. So this gave me a moment of integrity too. I mean, I sort of felt like, I actually want to live that. I want to at least try that kind of life. And now I know that I can do it out of gratitude for this extraordinary act of grace and generosity that my father gave me and my mom, and I owed it to them to be honest and have integrity. And I thought, wow, this is a whole new world for me. So I always felt like the motivation to obey for me came deepest and best when it came from a place of gratitude. And I noticed when I read the King Benjamin address, he creates this extraordinary experience with God's love that they feel. And you'll notice right after he finishes speaking, they make a covenant to obey. That's the first thing they say. We will obey God. And the good news is they made that covenant. The bad news is they and I and you and all of us will never successfully fulfill that covenant perfectly.
Right.
Like I had no desire to do evil at that moment in my life,
right.
but those desires came back. I made mistakes and I had to repent of those mistakes. And I think Adam and Eve do the same thing out of the Garden of Eden. Like they feel this incredible mercy extended to them. And they suddenly realized that God kind of understood them all along. That's how I felt. I felt like God understood me and I was okay. So when I made that commitment to obey, I also made a commitment to repent, which, I mean, that leads into the next covenant of sacrifice. But if you pay attention in the temple ceremony, those two covenants go together because it's really a commitment to obey that's coupled with a commitment to repent, to have some way of acknowledging error. Yeah. Which is what sacrifices are about, right? And that took me also a while to learn. You know, when you say, "Oh, I'm going to be perfect now," and then you screw up again, you know, or you screw up in a new way because you didn't know there were, like, you know, as King Benjamin also says, there's so many ways to sin. I can't even tell them all to you. I needed to learn to be forgiving of myself, but every time you feel God's mercy and generosity, to me, it just inspires a deeper desire to be more obedient, but also a little more patient with myself.
That is such a good story, and it feels so reminiscent of my teenage years. So thank you for sharing that. It speaks to the difference of obedience as a response to coercion versus as a response to loving mercy, and how persuasive God's loving mercy is when we truly make contact with it. I found in my life that when I perceive God to be dictative, it evokes a rebellious response in me. Yeah. Because that sort of control and pressure is one that I break under when I feel that the stakes are that high and that God's love and presence depends on my perfect obedience. I run away from that.
Yeah.
Because the weight of that is crushing, and instead of feeling the pain of my own failure and in response God's abandonment over and over and over again, I leave in order to protect myself. That is how I respond to that sort of understanding of God. But when I'm faced with a God that is perfectly loving and merciful and tender and present with me and is unwavering even when I waver, that breaks me in a different way.
Yeah.
It breaks down my walls. It softens my heart. It breaks open my heart. And it evokes a desire to obey, not because I'm trying to earn him, but because I'm transformed by that kind of love. And I desire to draw closer to it and to emulate it. And in my gratitude for it, obey and give my life to him. And that story, I just feel like your father emulated Christ in a really beautiful way in that moment.
Yeah, it's beautiful what you just said. And I think a lot of people resonate with that. The lesson, I think, is it requires us in our families and in our wards to create environments of that kind of love, right? Because if I'm going to teach my children or teach a young person something about the commandments, which is a loving thing to do, I need to make sure that they experience that love, right? That they know that love, they feel it, they know it's real. Yeah. And sometimes that's a little tricky, right? You want to communicate unconditional love, but you want to communicate standards. Right. That can feel like a contradiction. And so some people shy away from teaching the standards because they want to make sure that they're just communicating the love. And then there are people who do the opposite, right?
It's tricky.
And I don't think either really serves us as well as if we get it right in the middle, right? In that sweet spot where we help people experience love. And then we help point them to some ways in which they can reciprocate that love. I mean, that's the principle I like, is just think of obedience as reciprocating. I've been given a lot. God apparently wants me to do some things that I'm not sure they come naturally to me, but
Right.
you know what? I kind of like the challenge. I trust him enough. I think I'm game, you know. And the thing is some of those commandments, the big ones that, at least for me, the word of wisdom was primary. I mean, I look back and I joke, I've said this in testimonies before, you know, when people say, I don't know where I would be without the church. And I'm like, I know where I would be. And I'm really glad I'm not there, because I don't think my body could have withstood what I was doing to it.
Yeah.
And I think I really could have destroyed my life. And a lot of commandments are, you know, how are you going to keep the Sabbath day holy? How are you going to honor your parents? I mean, those are different kinds of commandments that involve a lot of experimentation. But there's certain commandments, like the word of wisdom, that are guardrails, right? They're ways of saying, look, this isn't going to guarantee you're not going to have problems in your life. It doesn't mean you're not going to be unhappy. It doesn't mean you're not going to have other kinds of related problems. But my goodness, if you can avoid addiction to alcohol or to drugs, you're going to avoid a lot of problems, a lot of ways in which your happiness would be a lot harder to come by. So get on board with that. And then we can start working on some other things, you know? So I do think that message is also important to people. Say, this is one way to kind of avoid a lot of problems that can grow over time. But we just have to be careful how we communicate.
Yeah. One thing I did want to touch on before we move forward that I just think is a really interesting point that you made. In your paper on obedience, I'm going to pull a quote from that. You say, speaking to obedience as one interpretation being the path towards conformity, the perpetual struggle for self-mastery that I think so many of us struggle with and feel, versus the freedom to truly love God as we are loved. And obedience is the path towards fuller realization. And you spoke to, when you were sharing the story with your father, that you felt free to obey. And I just would love to hear from you, what is true freedom versus this counterfeit, which is do whatever you want and there's no consequences? And what is true obedience versus this obedience that's driven by fear?
Yeah. I think the freedom comes from being liberated into a better version of yourself, I guess. And I think the enslavement of disobedience can be, I mean, if all I'm doing is reacting to people who are too doctrinaire or, you know, too dogmatic, and so I come to church and I just chafe at everything that's happening, we can get into these states of mind where we're very reactive to everything and we become very sensitized to things. And those may be real mistakes, right, that other people are making, but that's not the healthy state of mind you want to find yourself in, right? Because people are going to do what people are going to do. And some of those people may be your close family and close friends. So that can be hard, but you can't control other people. You have to define your relationship to your God, and you have to find your spiritual path. And if my spiritual path has been completely steered in a certain direction because I'm just reacting against what I don't like, I don't think that's a path of true freedom. I think it's not very creative, for one, right? It's just reacting to everything, and it's not building something proactively. So I just felt so instinctively alive when I made that turn in my life. I will say, by the way, that my brother died just about 4 months later.
Wow.
So it was really close on the heels of that experience that I experienced an utterly shattering experience, just horrifying and very, very painful. But I also felt comfort, and the comfort was irrational. It wasn't attached to any ideas. It wasn't like I had some narrative in my head, like, oh, he's in a better place or anything like that. I just felt loved. I felt God's arms around me, and I felt that so palpably that I actually was oddly like hugging people and telling other people that I love them.
Wow.
When they were comforting me, I just felt this overpowering feeling of love and appreciation for other people. I felt love and appreciation for life.
Wow.
So I don't know. I think what I keep coming back to is that we have to discover a kind of fullness of life for ourselves and experience God's love. And if we can get to that point where we feel that fullness and experience it and it's real to us,
Yeah.
a lot of that reactivity and anxiety, it just goes away.
Yeah.
It's not like I talk therapied my way out of it or something. I didn't even know what talk therapy was when I was 18 years old, but I experienced something very, very real.
Yeah.
And the thing is, you have to keep experiencing that.
Yeah.
You know, you experience it once and you say, I want to be a good person. That's great. But you have to keep preparing yourself and facilitate or make more likely that that experience will happen again. And that's why I just keep going to church. I keep going to the temple. I keep remembering to pray, or I keep remembering that I haven't been praying, and then I get back on it, and I keep remembering that I haven't been doing X, Y, or Z, and I try to do better. And to me, at my age, that's just life 101, and that's fine. Like, that's how it goes. I'm never perfectly steady, but I am pretty committed to a life of continually turning back and recommitting.
Yeah. I love that. This is something that has really resonated with me. You speaking to obedience as this pathway to freedom. I, similarly to you, lived in my own way a rebellious youth. I don't know if you know my story at all, but stepped away from my faith for many years as a teenager and was in this pursuit of freedom, my idea of freedom, which looked very much like me doing whatever I want and rebelling against whatever I was told when I was younger.
So you had at least more courage to do it more openly than I did.
Perhaps. And I lived that way for many years, but I was not free inside of myself. I was haunted by this feeling that I was imprisoned to who I was and that I couldn't be something more, no matter how hard I tried. And even though I was rebellious and lived this rambunctious life, I also was very committed to my spirituality and self-development, and I was trying to be a better person. I always felt pulled forward in that way, but I wanted to still do whatever I wanted. And exactly 5 years ago, I went through a conversion experience, and my entire orientation towards life, towards myself, towards God was transformed. And I went from living the way I thought I wanted to live to now suddenly, because I could not deny the witness that I received of Jesus Christ, I, in response, just had to change my life. What was so profound to me was the freedom I experienced in that container of obedience and discipline. And I have become more disciplined than I ever imagined for myself. And I feel more free than I ever imagined for myself.
Beautiful.
And that's the paradox of God. It sounds imprisoning and restraining to commit ourselves in this way and to, as a disciple, discipline ourselves in this way. But until you actually experience it, you cannot know the true freedom.
And there's a constant temptation that you can easily convince yourself of, that you don't need that partnership because that partnership with God would constrain you. It would smother you. You would lose sight of who you are. And I've been in that state of mind many times in my life, over many stages of life. And every single time I eventually realized this is a totally bankrupt idea. And I noticed that my obedience corresponds very frequently to how I start to imagine God. And when I find myself willing to lean into obedience, I feel he's revealed to me more clearly. The phrase in the scripture that really resonates with my experience is the difference between worshiping a God after my own image versus worshiping the living God. The living God is a real subject. He's a real person. He's a real intelligence. He's a real power. He's a real presence. But the God after my own image is this thing, this story I keep telling myself, or an image I project that is really intended as constant self-justification. So there's always that fear that when you let go of self-justification, that means you have to lose your will. And then you realize when you submit yourself to God that you didn't even have your will until you did. Right?
Yeah, entirely.
Because again, you were just reacting. You were conforming to your reactions rather than finding that true agency, which is a kind of creativity, and it's a freedom. And part of that is a freedom from vice, right? I mean, if I'm struggling constantly with chemicals that are damaging my body, then I'm compromising that freedom in a pretty significant way. But I still do it by scrolling too much on my phone or whatever else that makes me numb spiritually. And I can see myself slipping into a state of mind that is that same kind of stupor, you know. And then you find yourself getting more irritated by life and more ungrateful for things and more mad at people or institutions. And it's just not a happy place to stay.
Completely relate to that, in that the closer we draw to God, the more we commit ourselves to that relationship, the more my will and agency becomes available to myself, and I have greater capacity to choose instead of being driven by this reactivity, by this dopamine chase or whatever, this compulsive need to be soothed and comforted by my vice. There's freedom. I'm free to be and live the way I desire for myself. And I love what you said about your relationship with obedience being directly correlated to how clearly you are seeing God for who he is. I think that is so true and so fascinating. And I think there's like a lot there to sit with and explore. You did speak a bit to sacrifice. I feel like obedience flows into sacrifice quite easily. It's easy to feel how they're connected. Maybe you could just touch on the connection you're feeling there.
It's presented in the temple. We see the altar as a symbol of sacrifice, which is primarily in the Christian understanding a broken heart and a contrite spirit. So that's interesting, right? Because you just made a commitment to obey, and now you're making a commitment to feel brokenhearted and contrite, which means you didn't obey. Right?
Fascinating.
You obeyed and you didn't obey, or you want to obey, but you're not able to obey all the time, or you didn't do it the way you wanted to, or you lost your motivation and now you got to start over. I am such a believer in accepting my brokenness. The power that comes from accepting it is just amazing. The weakness that comes from denying it is amazing.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I felt early on, because of those experiences as a young person, it sort of always felt like a thorn in my flesh all my life. You know, I always felt like, I don't know, I would meet other LDS people who just had lived a very squeaky clean life and never swore, never dreamed of puffing on a cigarette. And I would be like, oh man, what makes people like that? Why wasn't I like that? I feel like I was engineered wrong or something. But I got to a point where I was so grateful that I was weak. I just feel so grateful that I feel those vulnerabilities, and they've never really left me entirely. And they've shaped who I am, but they've given me God in a way that maybe if I had never had those problems, I wouldn't feel what I feel. I wouldn't have deepened my relationship to God. I wouldn't have worked as hard. I feel the same way about marriage and family life. My wife and I love each other more than we ever did, but we know we're weak. We have certain weaknesses in our marriage like anybody does, and we just work at them, but we don't deny them anymore. And we don't like freak out when they show up, because we know that that's what keeps us humble. It helps us to remember to be forgiving to one another and turn again to each other. And when we do, that deepens the relationship, you know? So I think that's the principle of sacrifice in my mind, is just that constant acceptance. The performance in the ancient world of an animal sacrifice is this very external manifestation of admission that you broke something. And it's also what we consider to be confession, right? That's a sacrifice. So I think of it, those as very paired. And I think of the law of the gospel and the law of chastity as these sort of deeper, more pervasive ways of making the atonement of Christ work through the entirety of our bodies and the entirety of who we are. That we have to guard our passions, we have to guard our thoughts, we have to guard our behavior. But the language, especially the more updated language in the endowment ceremony, continually reminds us this is connected to the atonement, right? This is all about Christ. And then I think it sort of prepares us for the big thing, which sanctification is not an end in and of itself. Your happiness is God's purpose, but your happiness is found in working and serving to make the world a better place. And that involves you giving of your life to God. And so you have to turn all of that sanctification work that you're doing outward, because that's what God's preparing you to do. And I think that's what the law of consecration is really all about. I think it starts with the personal spiritual journey. It includes a commitment to the institution of the church, to build it through service and commitment to callings and community. But its ultimate direction is toward building God's kingdom on the earth and the establishing of what we call Zion, which is, for lack of a better word, world peace. It's the end of poverty. It's the end of war. It's the end of conflict. It's universal human well-being and flourishing. That's a big, big task, and that's very outwardly oriented. And I see all of this sanctification as preparation for that work.
Yeah. It feels to me like if obedience is the seed, the beginning, consecration is the harvest. It's like what we're moving towards, what we're working towards. It's the fullness, the full expression of what we're being invited into, the quality of life, the quality of relationship with God, with each other, with the earth. And this paper you wrote on consecration, it felt like a call to action in a lot of ways. It felt like a great invitation to expand what we believe is even possible, to expand our trust that for this we were born, to meet the needs and the demands and the state of the world. But I know for me, and I think a lot of people, it can feel incredibly overwhelming to approach the mess, the reality of the mess that we're in. And yet Jesus Christ always exemplified walking right into the mess. That was his life. And as Christians, as followers of Christ, I believe that's our calling.
Yeah.
So how do we do that without feeling entirely overwhelmed and shrinking before it?
Well, I think it begins and ends at the person you are and the life experiences that you have. Obviously, there's one part of your life that you don't have access to yet, and that's the future. For all of us, right? What happens tomorrow is still yet to be seen, but there's the present. That's the most important moment, right? And I can be present to my life, in my life, to other people, and to the circumstances that I'm in. When I read the headlines or I am paying attention to things that other people are doing, that's important. I mean, I'm a big believer in reading your news and being informed about what's going on in the world and being a really proactive citizen and informed citizen. That's hugely important. But I also don't believe that it's healthy for me to believe that my actions will stop everything bad from happening in the world. I can't even stop bad things from happening in my own life.
Mm-hmm.
I can't stop them from happening to people I love. So every religious tradition has a different way of articulating this kind of wisdom, but it's the wisdom of understanding that the only thing I can control is how I engage with the present world around me. I can't control how other people respond. I can't control other people's choices. I am in strong disagreement with the line of thinking that we sometimes fall into theologically, where we imagine all these bad things happening in the world for some divine purpose that shields us from having to care or to act. I think that's a terrible mistake to make in life. But one of the reasons we do that is because we don't want the burden of saving the whole world, right? Yeah. But that's also a misunderstanding, I think. I am answerable to the world. I'm answerable to the suffering of other people. I'm answerable to the relationships I have in my life. I'm not an independent being that's completely disconnected from everybody else. I'm connected to everyone and everything. My sphere of influence is where I can focus my attention and give of who I am. And I don't have to give who you are. I don't have to give in the way that anyone else gives. I get to give as George Handley. I get to give as the person who's been through the experiences I've been through. And that's what consecration to me means, is God is going to say, you've been on this really unique path. You've had some really special, unique experiences and adventures that no one else has had, the combination of which, right, has made you who you are. Your early childhood experiences, your experiences in family, your learning and your growing and your suffering and the things you yearned for and the things that you tried and failed at, and all of that adds up to who you are. And the beauty of consecration is God saying, I'll take all of you. There's not one part of you that I don't want. Even that stupid teenager that I was, he wanted. He wanted. And you know, I think he made pretty good use of that guy because I gave him to him. I said, okay, you want him? He's yours. I know I'm mixing my pronouns up really weirdly, but I will give my life to you if that's what you think you can make use of. And I discovered pretty early on, like I was saying, right after my brother's death, and then I served a mission right after that, I was like, oh, I'm actually of use to people. And and it's not just because I'm now this automaton that a lot of people think religious people become, right? Where I'm just a cookie cutter version of somebody else. I was me. Yeah. I was George Handley. I wasn't anybody else. I mean, sure, I was following some of the same rules, but none of us were following them in exactly the same way or with the same motivations anyway, even on a mission, right? But I was able to bring to bear my memories, my experiences, my emotions, my personality, my sense of humor to the relationships that were right in front of me, the situations that were right in front of me. And sometimes all I was doing was generic stuff, but every so often I was doing something that maybe only I could do. And most of us spend a lot of our lives just wanting that. Like, I just want to know that who I am matters and makes a difference. And I tell students this all the time. If you will just decide, fundamentally decide, which I think is obedience, I want to give my life to God. I want him to make use of who I am. And if you make that decision, then he's going to figure out like what it is, all the different pieces of your life that maybe they feel fragmented and scattered all around. He's going to bring them together, and he's going to put you in circumstances where those experiences and even the mistakes you made along the way are going to be part of new forms of good that he repurposes all of it to higher ends.
Well, that's another piece of consecration, right? That we believe all things will be consecrated for good to those who love God, including our past and our sins and our mistakes, and that God wants to include those and will include those in his work. I found it so empowering for me to recognize that God not only can use me exactly as I am in my flaws, in my mess, to better the world and to further his work, but I actually don't know that we can serve to our greatest capacity when we don't bring our full self to God and to the moment, to life. We're not asked to leave behind the ugly parts or the parts that feel unresolved. I think it's when we bring our whole self to each other that the greatest change and healing can happen.
Yeah.
That's what I've found in my life. And also kind of circling back to how we orient ourselves to God and how clearly we see God. I think that the law of consecration in my life feels overwhelming when I'm living in this sort of relationship with God that's based in scarcity and that's based in I have to earn this, like, unless I consecrate my entire life, I will miss out on God's love and God's presence and that relationship. And I think when we move from a place of knowing that that's freely given, that we're not going to earn that by working and giving 110%, that's not what this is about. But rather, when we live in abundance in that relationship and know that as we are, always God is here and God loves us and will use us and work with us and help us, then my cup runneth over and I have more to give.
Yeah.
And it's not out of this place of fear, like if I don't do this, then God will forsake me. But it's from this place of love and trust in that relationship and confidence and just a desire to, again, emulate that love and mercy that we've been given. Yeah,
that's beautifully said. When it comes to big world problems and the anxieties that those can produce in us, I just think it's important that you take some action, that you're present in some way to where you are in your life. So speaking a little bit more in terms of civics, I would say finding a good cause, being anxiously engaged in a good cause or two or three outside of church. Being a part of the church community is really fundamental, but I think that's just the preparatory ground for meeting our moment in the world right now. I think Latter-day Saints have an enormous responsibility and opportunity to show America how to be in community among different people of different politics. I think we have a lot to give to the country and to the world. And I think feeling that opportunity is really motivating spiritually for me. It makes me want to stay clean. It makes me want to be strong. It makes me want to remember my covenants. But now it's no longer about, am I worthy before God? It's not even any longer, maybe I'm getting old enough now. It's not even any longer about whether I'm happy. It's just whether or not I'm doing good in the world and giving my life to God and making whatever difference I can. I don't get anxious. I should say there's a little subtlety there. I don't get anxious about the results of my actions. I'm much less connected to that than I was. I think as I got older, I realized how unhealthy it was to attach my self-esteem to my achievements and to the results of my actions. I just started to feel that there was something inherently valuable about the process of giving my life to other people. And I just do it more instinctively, and it does bring me joy, but it's not like I'm taking my emotional temperature every day anymore, or I'm checking to see if I'm meeting my goals, or I'm checking to see if I'm making a difference in so-and-so's life. I'm just trying to be present to the life around me and to ask myself, what is this moment calling me to do? And the more I live in that kind of state of mind, the more completely I feel myself sanctified, the more completely I feel myself partnered with God and all that we were describing earlier, that freedom and that creativity, it's all still there.
Yeah.
I don't know. I wrote another essay in Wayfair issue or two ago about improving our time. And I basically described a kind of transition that I went through, because I mean, I was really worried about my sins for a long, long time, because I felt like I had a lot of them and I had to work on them, and they were constantly hounding me. And like I said, I was feeling jealous of other people who weren't hounded by them. And then I realized that wasn't such a bad problem, and I could rely that much more on Jesus, and that would help me, and that would be my superpower. But at some point I realized, like, the goal of my life is not my salvation. It's making other people happy. It's trying to enrich other people's lives. I mean, yeah, that makes me happy. And yeah, that maybe I'm told it brings me salvation. I don't really care anymore.
Yeah.
I don't know if that sounds, I certainly don't mean any disrespect at all to God for the gift of salvation, but I don't feel like I'm chasing after a trophy anymore, or chasing after some award. The reward is in the living a consecrated life itself.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm already in heaven when I'm in that state. I don't need anything more. I feel abundance, right? I don't feel lack.
Something that you said in this paper that I read is that as Latter-day Saints, as disciples of Christ, the goal is to lose ourselves. And I think that is where true freedom is when we are fully losing ourselves in the giving to life.
It can be so boring being stuck with yourself, right?
It really is. It really is. And it's in those moments where I lose myself to the moment, and I lose myself to the person that I feel the most alive.
Yeah. And you can lose it. It's not all like drudgery service, right? And service isn't drudgery, but it can be. Yeah. But it's also, you lose yourself in nature.
Yeah.
You lose yourself in beautiful music.
Yeah.
You lose yourself in creativity.
Yeah.
You certainly can lose yourself in service, right? You lose yourself in compassion when you're really feeling someone else's sorrows. You don't remember yourself anymore. That was one of the greatest gifts of my brother's death, to put it somewhat awkwardly, is that I felt other people's losses really keenly. And it scared me at first, because I didn't want to feel some of that again, you know, especially suicide. Like for a long time, I kind of didn't want to be around other people who had had suicides. But I realized very early on that, first of all, there are a lot of people who've had that experience, and we need to know each other. We need to talk to each other. And when other people are going through suicidal feelings and mental health struggles, that used to trigger me, but now it just feels like I'm repurposing my grief by feeling more compassion. And I don't think about myself. I think I was thinking about myself when I was re-traumatized, if that makes sense. I don't blame anyone who experiences that. I just think maybe it's a process that over time healing happens, where you finally can forget yourself. But there are lots of ways to lose yourself, and they're all Christian. Yeah. I mean, there are some that are chemical, and those aren't great.
There we go. Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. Just to close this out, there's a lot that we've explored, especially in regards to obedience and consecration. And if there's just like one thing you would want me to walk away with from everything we've explored today in regards to obedience, and maybe even more specifically, a consecrated life, what would that be?
Well, maybe it would be something along the lines of, going back to what we started out talking about a little bit. I seek moments of connection to the gift of existence. I don't want to sound too like profound in saying that, like it sounds like a guru statement or something, but
I'll take
like,
it.
well, I just think being alive is such an extraordinary gift. And I'm sure if I lost my sight, or if I lost my health, I'd have to adjust in some pretty significant ways. But I hope that I would still feel the glory and generosity and gift of existence. There's a line from Dostoevsky's Brothers Karamazov, which I love, spoken by this very wise monk who says, "Don't you know that one day is enough to know all happiness?" And what Dostoevsky was reaching for, and this is a man, by the way, who was sentenced to be shot to death in his real life.
Wow.
And at the last second was given a reprieve.
Wow.
And psychologically, spiritually, something shattered in his life because he suddenly felt that one day was a gift. Wow. He found himself literally kissing the earth and hugging strangers because he was alive when he thought he was dead. And I think just maybe practicing, I want to be careful how I phrase this, but imagining life after death. I think that's one of the benefits of temple service, is that you are imagining this person, this stranger. In the case for my brother, it was a real person, right? I mean, they're all real people, but this was someone I knew. And imagining what they would want me to feel being alive right now is a tremendously powerful gift.
Wow.
And I've lost other people in my life, and they're all very close to me in my mind. Like I try to keep them really close. And I always ask them, what do you think I should be feeling right now? What do you think I should do with my life? And the feeling I always get is love it. Love it like crazy, because it's life. So I don't know how that sounds, but I just feel that's in my bones, that I'm so lucky to be alive. And I want to be reminded over and over again how lucky that is. And if that means I'm savoring a meal that my incredible wife makes because she's a magician chef, and I say to myself, like, this is heaven. This is heaven. Or if I'm listening to really, really beautiful music and I think, is there anything better? I mean, surely not, right? I've experienced heaven many, many times in this life, and I don't expect, I mean, I'm sure heaven's going to be pretty great, but I don't think it's going to be that different from all the intense moments of joy I've experienced in this life.
Yeah.
So if they're available to me now, I want all of it, you know? And I just think the more I've cultivated that attitude, all those other things just come so much more easily. Because it's not transactional. It's just like, oh, I was given so much. I love giving. I'll just keep giving. I'll pass it on. I'll repurpose. I'll do what I'm asked because I love what happens when I do.
I love that. And it appears to me as you're speaking that this process that God's inviting us into of aligning ourselves with these laws is the way in which our eyes become open to just how unbelievably precious life is, so that we can experience it and be and exist in love with life and this existence. It's pretty incredible what's available to us.
Yeah. And people become more beautiful. The world becomes more beautiful. Food tastes better.
I have found these things to be true.
Nature thrills us more.
This is the
we're more capable of holding more happiness.
Yeah, entirely. Wow. I feel really inspired. Thank
Good.
you so much. George, thank you. This has been really lovely. I'm excited to move forward and live and love this life more fully.
Wow. Congrats on what you're doing. I think it's phenomenal.
Thank you.
It's really great.
Thank you so much.
Consecrating your life.
Thank you. I appreciate that.